Hello. Welcome to the Hot Mess.
Not mom. We don't plan this stuff, we swear.
We totally don't.
We just random. So episode
49.
What? Oh my gosh.
It's crazy.
We've been at this for over a year.
Over a year now. Yep. We've got
49
75 subscribers, you guys. Thanks for watching.
Yes, thank you.
Whenever you watch,
Whenever.
maybe you just have subscribed and now you're like, oh.
Maybe fast forward through like 90% of them.
That's right.
It's fine. Whatever. We're just happy you subscribed.
That's right.
Like and share once in a while.
Cassie, let's give her
Yeah.
2 cents.
Yeah, she has to speak up here. So
Yep. So we were
But,
sitting here.
yeah.
And we were like, we did an episode, I think it was on episode 45 that we talked about schooling decisions.
yes.
Well, Jack and I are both kind of last minute people. All of a sudden we get this feeling like I have to make this decision. It has to happen now.
Yeah, because school's about to start.
Yeah. So we finally made decisions on what curriculum we're going to go with. And I didn't do what I thought I was going to do.
Yeah, and actually I didn't either.
So we thought we would share that story with you guys because it'd be a little bit lighthearted, a little bit more like, hey, this was our thought process and this is what happened.
Yeah.
And maybe it would be encouraging to you to go, oh, yeah, that's how I make decisions too.
Yeah, or if you're like just recently decided, oh no, you're going to homeschool. Crap, what do I do now?
And I better order curriculum yesterday.
I got to order curriculum yesterday, like a month ago. It might be helpful to just think about some of the options that there are and the different learning avenues in which homeschool is presented, because there's lots of different options. So,
Yeah, there's a lot of different curriculum out
Yeah.
there. And I feel like we can kind of touch on some of them and then
Yeah.
maybe describe like why we went with what we went with.
yeah, I
So-
think that sounds great.
Yeah.
So, Becca, longtime homeschooler
Well, 3 consecutive years.
compared to me.
When we were leaving Russia, I homeschooled.
Yeah.
But I didn't
And-
order curriculum. So
Oh.
I can plug that too, that there is kind of a free online curriculum you can
There
do.
are some, yeah.
Do I remember what it's called?
There's a couple that are easy peasy.
Yeah.
Khan Academy.
Yeah, that's what I used. Easy peasy.
They're free, and I think they accept donations if you can, but they are free, and
Yeah.
you can use those.
Yep. You print your own material is what you do. And
Yeah.
she has like K through high school.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
kind of goes through. So you can do that online. So if all of a sudden you're like, oh, I do want to homeschool, but I don't know what curriculum I want to use.
Yeah, or I don't have a ton of money to spend right now all at once because I didn't save for it because I didn't know I was going to do it or whatever. Then you can still get started.
Yeah. It's an option.
Yeah, and you might find you like it. Like some people I know do use both those exclusively, but some people I know use like for certain subjects. Like, okay, hop onto Khan Academy for math, or and so that gives you some options. I don't know if you can hear the children squealing in the background, but
It's not distraught squealing
Yeah.
yet. So
it's not. No, it's totally happy squealing.
yes, it's happy squealing.
But yeah, so there's some free options that are also
Yep.
immediately available. Like you can go to your computer and sign up and have it today.
Yep. And then other than that, like I started with Sunlight, which I know a lot of people start with Sunlight. And it mainly is because I kind of feel like it was, for me, whenever I made that decision, it was the most, oh my gosh, you guys. They're shooting us. Our older-ish children are shooting us with rubber band guns. And I could have swore it was a bug.
on you.
I thought it was a bug. I did.
So it was a bug. Was not a bug. It's bugs.
They're bugging us.
Adolescent bugs.
Negative attention is better than no attention at all.
That's right.
So I used Sunlight and did that mainly because it seemed to be the most logically planned out. Like they basically have everything written out for you for your days, what you're supposed to read, what the kids are supposed to do this worksheet, do this. Like it just made more sense to me at the time. But there were definitely some things after the first year, after doing it with Sarah, that I was like, there just was a lot of reading. There was a lot of reading. And so
that was our issue. That's why I didn't go with Sunlight initially, because I don't have a very strong reader in my oldest child, which is fine. She has, learning disabilities. But I knew, even looking at it, that the amount of reading was going to be hard for us to do, because there's a certain amount they're supposed to do independently, and I was like, that's not, none of that is going to be
it was a
independent reading. Yeah. So, I mean, which is awesome.
Yeah. For my oldest, she read all of her books within like the first 3 months.
Yeah.
And she was done.
Yeah. So if you have an avid reader who's a
That's
strong
really
reader,
good.
yeah, then that works. If you
My
have
other
a
girls,
kid,
yeah, not so much.
Yeah.
They really struggled with the reading schedule.
yeah.
So.
Yeah. So knowing your kids, that's helpful.
Yep.
And sometimes you just have to try something, because I love the idea of having a very rich curriculum.
Yeah.
Or like a literature in the curriculum.
Right.
But then some, like you had one that it worked great for, and the rest not so much. And I knew I had one that was going to be
right. And there was just a ton of reading for like the history stuff too.
Yeah.
Like you'd sit down and like both Sarah and I, so we have all of our kids there, and like the first couple weeks we're like reading verbatim what they want us to do. We're following it, and it is like tons of reading. So we're reading and we're reading and we're reading, and we look up and our kids are just like
glazed over. I know.
so we were like,
Yeah.
and they're not retaining anything.
No, because they're
So that's when we kind of modified. But that meant we had to do more work on our end with it, because now all of a sudden we're having to pre-read it
to
and
see what you
pick
want
out. Like then I would just pick out the points that I thought were important and valid for the kids to remember for history and science. And so science was a little better, but the history portion was like, it was just a ton of reading.
Yeah.
I mean, even Sarah and I were like, I'm not retaining anything.
Yeah,
So-
because I think at some point then you're reading, it's just too much information to absorb it all.
Right.
But like, like you said, you have one that did great. So I think if you have kids who really enjoy reading,
Or they're
they love
auditory.
reading, they're auditory.
They're great. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the second year we went with it just because we were homeschooling together again, and we were like, well, we've already done it this way and we've modified it and we figured it out. So we just ran with it, and I didn't do, like, in terms of the reading assignments, it was like, okay, we are going to cut back on it. We're not going to like require our children, like the first year, I feel like what you were mentioning before we got on.
Yeah.
The first year you feel like, okay, here's my checklist, and I need to make sure that we do every single little thing.
Yeah.
And make sure that we get it all covered so that I feel like a good homeschool mom.
Yeah.
Like,
so my kids aren't like falling behind and the judgment of the world falls upon our shoulders.
exactly. Yeah.
Because your kids are illiterate.
Yeah. Exactly. But if you look at most of the public school kids.
Yeah. Really. But that's the difference of like, if your kids are in school, but they're struggling because they have learning disabilities or they have things, people are like, oh, it's just really hard. Like everybody's doing their best. They're just struggling.
Yep.
When you're homeschooling and your kids have disabilities or are struggling in a subject, it's like, well, what's the mom doing wrong?
Yeah. What are you doing wrong?
To cause them to be not learning what they should be learning.
Right.
And falling behind. And so there is a little bit of a stigma or a judgment there of like, well, it's your responsibility to make sure where they can go to public school, and if they're falling behind, people aren't like, well, the public school has failed. I mean, some people are, but most people aren't like, it must be the public school. It's really like, most people I think look at it like, oh, they must just really be struggling and they need some extra supports, and let's figure out what supports they need. And so, you can do that at home.
Yep.
But the world as a whole tends to look at it a little differently.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's because they're homeschooling that they're not keeping up. When really, they may not have been keeping up in school. Traditional school, public school.
Because they did need a little extra help.
Right.
So sometimes switching to homeschooling, I mean, that's why my mom ended up homeschooling me, is I needed that extra, like, one-on-one help to get me going. And then once I was going and knew what I was supposed to be doing and how to do it, I was great. And so sometimes I think that's also another reason to consider homeschooling is, maybe your kid does have learning disabilities and struggles a little more, but if you can figure out how their brain works and a system for them, that then they're able to just run with it and do it self-paced on their own.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
That is. It's
because all that's going to do is set them up for success in their adult life.
Yes, and teaching them how to learn, teaching them to like how to figure out what their best learning style is, so that they can remember that when they go out into the world and need to learn something for work or college or whatever they're gonna pursue. They have some tools.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I was just thinking back on like the way I learned was a lot of kinesthetic visual. And so when I had to memorize something, I would draw pictures. I would act it out. I would do motions, which as I was thinking about it, I was like, man, I would have looked cray-cray in public school. People have been like, oh, yeah, that Becca over there, she's cray-cray. Like, it's like I was learning the way that I knew how to learn. Sorry, we're not. It looked uneven. Sorry, folks. Okay, I think we're good now.
Yeah, I do better kinesthetically. Also, I think a lot of people do just because there's that hands-on piece. But I never was very good at just sitting at the desk listening. I need to be doing something. So a lot of times I would doodle or draw, and some teachers were fine with it. Some thought I wasn't paying attention, but it was what I had to do to get my brain to be able to listen. And not be distracted by everything around me, is like to doodle or draw. And I did terrible in science most of my schooling until I had, in high school, I had Mrs. Buckham. She was a very do-it teacher. Like she had so many experiments.
That's awesome.
She had so many hands-on projects that things started to click for me. I was like, oh, because I wasn't just looking at the book, reading it. I was like doing it. And it was like, oh my gosh. Oh, I had an A. I actually got an A. I actually took the like California science exam, and I got like a California Golden Award exam thing in science that year. But it was because she tapped into how I learned. And so I was like, it suddenly all clicked and made sense. So she was awesome. So cool. She was really awesome. Very good teacher. Yeah. And I thought science was like, it was really difficult for me before that. So just because there was a lot of like, read about plate tectonics out of your textbook now. And it was like, I can't like,
Can I see a picture? Play with some dirt.
Be like a diagram, you know, and I'm like, that's under there? Like I can't, you know, my brain would like kind of get a little bit, but when I could see it, like she had, did like these chemistry experiments, and like she actually blew up a beaker in our class on accident. I was first period. So sometimes she wouldn't have time to try something before class. We'd be like her experiment class. And she's like reading the recipe for this experiment in the beaker, and she's like, it says a pinch. What do you guys think a pinch is? And she's like, is that a pinch? And she's like asking the class. We're like, yeah, that's a pinch. It was like too much. She dropped it in, and the glass was like, it started turning all these colors and like moving in and out, and it was just like, whoosh, like burst. She's like, okay, you guys are the only ones that are getting that experiment today, because she was like, I don't know what they mean by a pinch. I'm not going to do it again, but it was awesome. So she would just constantly, you know, she just always was doing things that like grabbed your attention, pulled you in. It was like, you know, physically showed you. Fun. And I was like, oh, that's what I need to learn this. It's not that I don't like science or that I can't understand it. It's that reading it from a textbook isn't working for me. So